There was a growing tendency to look away from the harsh realities of urban society and to idealise another America, the America whose honest and earthy citizens had truly staked their claim on the plains of the Midwest. This vision of an American rural Eden had something in common with all other Edens. It attracted a lot of people and it didn't exist. It was something that you look back on with the kind of nostalgia that in times of stress gets confused with social history. The Depression devastated life in the country as well as in the cities of America, and though some people did better than others, there were no real areas of exemption. Nevertheless, this idea of Eden in the heartland struck a responsive chord with people who had been so battered and dazed by having the rug suddenly pulled from beneath them. And this found artistic expression in a group that called itself the Regionalists. Their loudest spokesman was Thomas Hart Benton, who loathed abstraction and New York itself. The Depression fostered a mood of isolationism and xenophobia in America, and Benton, to his own advantage, helped to focus that onto art. He claimed to be leading the charge for good, plain, honest American pictures, not foreign, not elitist, and not cityfied. In fact, Benton began as a modernist under the influence of Cézanne. And then, ironically given his later dislike of abstraction, he came under the spell of an early American abstractionist, Stanton MacDonald Wright. His own abstract paintings reflect Wright's. Benton turned his back on Paris and New York, returning in 1935 to where he'd come from, Kansas City, Missouri. He destroyed most of his early work to get, as he said, all that modernist dirt out of my system. He denounced New York's art world as a veritable Sodom filled with precious fairies who wear women's underclothes. In the heartland, he found an Eden of honest work and muscular wrists. The fullest expression of Benton's desire to be the voice of his people is this room, the lounge for Missouri's local politicians in the Jefferson City Capitol building. These murals are Benton's version of the history of the state, based on the Missouri River winding out of frontier times down to the present, which was the year 1936. Nowhere else can you get a better sense of the man, his rhetorical energy and his vulgarity, his love of the late Renaissance and his cornball humour, his overweening self-confidence and the anxiety that seems to be written all over these posturing figures in their buckling space. By the time that Benton was through with it, this wasn't a lounge anymore. As one aggrieved legislator complained, he couldn't sit down and have a game of cards with his cronies, not with Jesse James about to jump off the wall down the back of his neck. Others disliked Benton's homestead wife wiping her baby's butt, not the right image for the high deliberations of government. But they did like his vernacular and the big cast of characters, Huck Finn and his black friend Jim, Davy Crockett, and even Frankie shooting Johnny in the barroom for doing her wrong. Only a man who hated gays as much as Benton could have produced such a remarkable image of anal rape without apparently knowing it. But his colour is tawdrily emphatic, and he has no sense of surface. Paint is dry stuff for conveying the message. The rhythmical distortion of bone and muscular structure made his human figures weirdly overdeveloped. Here, in parody of Michelangelo and El Greco, are the twisting, bulging, overstressed forms of his mature work, mannerisms which would so influence his pupil, Jackson Pollock.
He did love the people of the Midwest, and he didn't like the idea of the American people having to buy art from another country. He felt very strongly about that. He didn't want to become, a Europhile in the sense of the art world. He wanted to deny and get away from the European influence and have an art that was purely and strongly American, and that it was certainly time for it. I think Daddy was a very physical person. I mean, he celebrated the working man. He thought that watching a welder with the sparks flying and the big mask and everything was one of the most dramatic things you could look at. And it was better to stay in touch with nature, with physical activities, with being able to chop wood, being able to hammer, make something or do something, or it kept you realer. As long as he felt that he was at war with his peers, he felt like he could go out there and just paint, and really show them where they're at.
As Benton got ever nastier about modernism and his cause was backed by conservative journalists, Stuart Davis uttered a protest. "I too think great art will come out of the Middle West," wrote Davis, "but certainly not on the basis of Benton's presumptions. Regional jingoism and racial chauvinism will not have a place in the great art of the future."
Benton became a writer, political writer, calling modern painters communists, and their foreigners are communists. I got it all over the place. Every place I went, when I went out to Kansas City, I was the hot abstractionist and goddamn communist to them. Everyone was, they said. That's what regionalism did to the art world. It separated them politically, not artistically.
Then as now, Americans resorted to doses of industrial strength nostalgia for the good old days as a refuge from the conflicted present. One artist specialised in images of hometown apple pie Eden. Next to the White House itself, this has to be about the most famous dwelling place in America. It didn't have an architect, at least as far as anybody knows, but it sure had a painter. And by posing his dentist and his sister in front of it, he turned it into the only picture by an American artist that would become an icon pretty well as famous as the Mona Lisa itself. American Gothic by Grant Wood. Wood painted it in 1930. You can't help reading it as the stern Puritan father defending the virtue of his not altogether alluring daughter with a pitchfork. It may be that Wood was slyly poking fun at the narrow-mindedness of the reigning values of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Or it may be that, as hundreds of thousands of Americans have thought, he was praising the enduring bedrock of American morality. Maybe both. The Gothic window makes the home the shrine of virtue. Grant Wood, a closet case if ever there was one, spent his entire life in the state of Iowa. He was Benton's timid alter ego, unwilling to argue about his work or even explain it much. He set up an art commune here outside the town of Stone City. From this base he wrote his manifesto, Revolt Against the City, exhorting students to stay put and feel free to depict what was local. Very occasionally there's a darker side, as here in Death on Ridge Road with its impending crash. The machine is a dangerous intruder in paradise with Walt Disney wheels.